Hello. Dumelang. Welcome to another episode, video. Today, I wanted to talk about one of your parents' worst nightmares. And I'm not talking about teenage pregnancy.
A small percentage who are still deciding what to do. A gap year offers opportunities to learn new skills.
The gap year after high gap year, as it's called.
I thought today we'll talk about a gap year. For those of you who might not know, this whole initiative, Wild Academia, was inspired primarily by my struggles in picking a career path. And boy, did I make a mess of that. If you want to read more about it, I got some articles, link in the description. But yeah, I really did make a mess out of that one. One of the things that I really struggled to make the most out of was a gap year. First of all, primarily because back then I didn't really know exactly what a gap year was, let alone know exactly what to do with a gap year. And second of all, try telling your black parent that you want to take some time off school to figure yourself out, and let me know how that works out for you.
I told you not to test me!
So anyway, personal experience aside, a gap year is actually a pretty helpful tool for young students. For example, according to a research paper by, Nieman on South African students' perception of the role of gap year in preparing for higher education, it was actually found that a lot of students perceive it as having a positive impact. And I quote, "Their gap year experience played a constructive role in preparing participants for higher education. It gave them time to get clarity on a career choice, which resulted in a higher level of motivation and a more focused approach to their studies. It cured them from burnout, facilitated their adjustment at university, improved their intercultural and interpersonal relationship skills, and contributed to their personal development, independence, and self-knowledge." So I think that's a very compelling argument. So with that in mind, I thought it might be a good idea to just discuss a bit what this gap year is. And
can taking a year off before college be beneficial to a student?
The issues that might come about you trying to take a gap year. So let's start first with, what is a gap year? Now, according to the American Gap Year Association, America has a whole association dedicated to gap year. That's how big a deal it is. A gap year is a structured period of time when a student takes a break from formal education to increase their self-awareness, challenge their comfort zones, and experiment with possible careers. Now, to be clear, this time away from formal learning is not for you to just go home, chill, and be lazy, eat pap all day, although a bit of rest never hurt anybody. It's a time for you that you have to make the most out of this time and try to figure out exactly what it is that you want to do with your life. Now, typically, most of this can be achieved by traveling, doing some volunteer work, internships, and just getting a job, or some other combination of some of these. The point is to place yourself in those situations that actually help you answer those important questions about what it is that you want to study, what it is that you want to do with the rest of your life. I would say the best gap year is essentially one that encourages you to self-reflect. It's one that encourages you to really think deeply about what your purpose is in life, and hopefully that can help you decide what it is that you would want to study in tertiary. Now, a friend of mine that I met many moons ago in Pretoria once told me about his gap year experience. Now, he was one of those students who was smart in high school but didn't know exactly what he wanted to study. So what did he do? He went on a ship. It was a missionary ship, and he traveled the world for about 5 years. Now, in all of this traveling that he did, he found that he actually loved doing logistic work, optimizing processes and so on and so forth. And that inspired him to come back and want to study industrial engineering. Now, the way that he actually even studied, the way his approach to university was actually much more different and much more mature, relative to the rest of us. He approached everything with a bit more focus, with a bit more appreciation. University has a lot of those subjects that a lot of people consider to be useless. For example, if I'm an engineer and I'm studying something to do with literature, what is that about? He would approach them differently. There was a certain level of maturity, a sense of focus to him. And sure enough, he finished his degree in record time and got really good grades. And as far as I know, he's very satisfied with his life. Now, I'm not saying to you that you should go on a ship and travel the world or even spend 5 years trying to figure out what it is that you want to do with your life, but I think you get the picture. Now, at this point, you would probably be thinking there's a number of factors to consider as far as this whole gap year is concerned. First of all, will you even survive telling your parents that you want to take a gap year? And even if you do survive that, what opportunities are there in your country to make the most out of your gap year? And another thing could be a worry that your friends might be leaving you behind. You might worry that you taking some time off while your friends go to school and study, they might get a head start. So we're going to discuss these possible issues, and you can also tell us what other issues you think might come about, and you can leave them in the comments below. Okay, so let's start first with the parents. Now, most parents are driven by fear. This is the reason why they don't really understand why a person wants to take a gap year. I remember when I wanted to take a gap year and I told my mother about this, she just lost it. I'm pretty sure all she heard was, I hate school, I don't want to ever go to school, I want to throw my life away or something to that effect, right? And considering how much our parents actually value formal education as the key to success, you can imagine just how much of a panic they would have when you say that you don't really want to go there at the time that they expect you to. So to your parents, you taking a gap year is not you trying to figure yourself out. To them, all they hear is you don't want school and you want to explore some other alternative lifestyle which has no guarantees of success or anything like that. And parents want security for their children. One of their biggest fears is that 1 year, if you decide to take a year off, their fear is that 1 year will turn into 2 will turn into 3, and before you know it, you're 40 years old, still living with them, trying to figure out exactly what it is that you want to do with your life. And full disclaimer, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a 40-year-old trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. I'm simply just saying that's not what your parents want for you. So don't come out here calling me ageist or something like that. The positive thing here is that luckily the statistics do not necessarily back this up. According to the American Gap Year Association, again, about 90% of the students that take a gap year go back within the next year. Now, I'm aware of the fact that this is an American statistic, but I would like to believe that the discrepancy is not that wide, between Americans and us here in Africa. This is assuming that obviously financial constraints are not part of the reason why a person is not going back to school. But in any case, this conflict between you and your parents can make it very difficult for you to have a constructive gap year. Because make no mistake about it, you need their support to have a productive year. So you need to work with them and not against them. Hopefully you are the type of person who has the kind of parent who would be willing to try to understand what it is that you're trying to say and work with you in this. But more often than not, that's probably very rare. You're probably going to have to deal with a parent who just doesn't understand. And then, unfortunately for you, you're going to have to take on the monumental task of doing the research and trying to explain to them what it is that you want to do. What is this gap year? How do you intend to spend your year so that it is productive, so that they can understand. It's not going to be an easy task. But if you're really determined to do this, then it's something that you're going to do. Because again, I cannot emphasize enough how much you need your parents for this. Okay, let's talk about environment and opportunities. Now, I imagine for some of you, when I talked about traveling, you probably thought, ugh, that's a tall order. And fair enough, traveling is expensive. But I would argue that you don't necessarily have to travel around the world or even outside your country. You can just explore your country, which might be relatively cheaper. That the point is for you to get out of your comfort zone and get different perspectives. Challenge your thinking, challenge the way that you see the world. Even so, the point still remains that your environment is an important consideration. You know, if you come from a third world country or the developing countries, it could be difficult to find opportunities for internships, doing volunteer work, and so on. And unfortunately, honestly, at the moment, we don't really have the answers for you, but we do intend to explore these. We do intend to see what opportunities are available in different environments. Another thing to keep in mind at the moment is that it's not everybody who's gonna want to take a gap year after matric.
Many will be looking forward to studying at universities and colleges around the country, but for a small percentage who are still deciding what to do, a gap year offers opportunities to learn new skills, earn money, and perhaps even to travel.
So keep that in mind, that it may not be as bad as you initially think. And on top of that, I would imagine a lot of companies might be very happy actually to take volunteers. And yeah, you may not get paid for it, but at this point, the experience would probably be more valuable than the money anyways. So you might have to do a bit of trade-offs here and there. Finally, friends leaving you behind. Now in Sesotho we have this saying that which is essentially a way to try to communicate that it doesn't matter who gets off the mark first, we all eventually reach our destinations. This is really something to think about. Life is long and it's complicated, and it's definitely not linear. You taking a year, a couple of months off to try to figure out what you want to do with your life will most likely benefit you more than it will do you harm. The standardized way in which we grew up being graded in school and so on might have you convinced that life works in some linear way, but I can promise you that it doesn't. No one is ahead of you, and you're not ahead of anybody. Everybody is just in their own journey, and you have to trust yourself enough to try to figure out what it is that would work for you, and be brave enough to follow your own journey. In the long term, those fears of my friends are leaving me behind and so on and so forth, they won't matter. To wrap up, I would say, look, a gap year might not be for you, and that's great. But I think we can all agree that self-knowledge is important. Understanding your internal motivations, what drives you, what your dreams are, aspirations, and so on and so forth, are important. And they're an important part of living a fulfilled and successful life, regardless of how you get there. If you could just take one thing away from this, it would be this: know thyself.